Welcome into a DNVR Avalanche podcast. Something has gone terribly wrong here, and they're letting me host a show. I'm just kidding.
We get to hear you host a show. Something has gone terribly right, I think.
Nobody's under duress. I promise they volunteered to let me host this show. And it's a slightly different show than what we normally do. It's an extension of the 5x5 piece that Jesse does each week, just detailing different things around the league. This episode today is going to be pretty focused on Avalanche things, and there's plenty to talk about just being back in a locker room, being back around the rink. We kind of wanted something separate from the day-to-day pods to capture the little details of what we're seeing around the rink now that we are able to be back in locker rooms.
Yep. There's so much going on that like we almost don't have enough time in the regular daily pods, or especially on a day like today, it's game day. We don't have time to get in all the just interesting little, like you said, nuanced stuff that we get now being back in the locker room. You and I are at Family Sports 3 days a week, 4 days a week now, and we see a lot of stuff. And so we were saying, like, we want to be able to talk about this.
Yeah.
So we're going to shoehorn this pod into our very busy schedule today. But it's all good stuff. It's all fun stuff to talk about.
It is, because I look back on even just Bednar media availability. Every time we get to hear from him, we couldn't possibly transcribe everything that he says, right. Even just going one question at a time. He has a lot to say. I think it's important to capture, though, and let that be transparent to people who don't get to be in that room.
Yep.
Just some of the different things he's saying. Just being back in the room generally has been important. So I kind of wanted to start there because you had last season not being in the room. Now you're jumping into this season.
Yeah.
How has it been different? There's definitely personalities in the room. Are there any that stick out to you?
So it's a great question, and I think that's the biggest part is the personalities. I'm going to use Josh Manson as the example because he's great, right? And we knew that he was great last year at the podium, but you get podium Josh Manson, who's still great, who still gives you good answers and stuff. But there's been twice already where I've just spent some time just kind of chatting with him at his stall, not necessarily stuff, like on the record or whatever, but just learning a bit more about these guys and who they are as people. And, he was telling me about what a pain it was for them to find a house that fit what they needed now with the new, at the time with the new kid on the way. Now the new little girl is here. It was stressful. We had to fly them back and forth during the playoffs, and we wanted them to get out here, but we didn't know where I was going to sign in UFA. And so it's just, you learn a little bit about these guys' personalities. I'm trying to think of one that maybe surprises me. I guess I don't know about surprise, but I had forgotten how fun Mikko Rantanen is in the locker room. He's just, I think it was Lehkonen who described him last year as a big boy or a little boy in a big boy's body. And you just get to see that a lot when you're in the locker room, just their personalities coming through. So that's been I think the biggest difference is we're getting to re-know these guys on a little bit more personal level. We're in their element, right? When they come up to the podium to answer our questions, they're kind of in our arena. We are asking the questions, whatever. But when we're in the locker room, at least for me, you tell me if it feels different. I feel very much like we're in their space.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you get to see them a little bit in their space. Yesterday, I was super bummed you didn't get to be there for it.
I'm so mad.
Cale Makar and Logan O'Connor had a little bit of a bet for the weekend series between UMass and DU. UMass sweeps the series, so LOC had to do his full media availability wearing a UMass national championship shirt, had to say a whole bunch of nice things about UMass, and Cale's just sitting there just off camera from everyone laughing, just dying laughing. And you don't get to see that, when they're just coming to the podium. So it's been great. But I was glad you mentioned that about Jared, because that's one thing I don't think a lot of people realize is I was going to try to look real fast. His practice availability regularly pushes 10 minutes plus. There's been multiple times where I couldn't even post that full availability if I wanted to on Twitter because it cuts you off.
Absolutely.
So there's times where he in particular, I think, gives us a lot that we'll be able to talk about, hopefully through this as a weekly kind of show, or, we try to put on our written pieces because there's a lot told to us that it's not that we don't want to put it out. We choose not, we don't have, we can't, we don't have time. There's too much content.
it's a privilege to be able to do what we do, and we don't want to gatekeep any piece of information.
Yep.
And it just takes a second. So I think this is going to be a good way to give people even more access to some of those things that, they're little details he mentions here and there. But one thing I want to do later in the show is kind of break down different things he has said about the decision guys.
Yes.
The Bleed, the Kaut, the Sedlak, even the Maltsevs. Like, he had interesting reactions and different reactions and how he described each of these players. I think it's good to recap it in one place. But before I get ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to opening night. You know, a new season is upon us. It's a defending title team. There's a lot on the line, but they started their first 10 games, I think 5-4-1 last season. So
that's right.
There's just a lot of season left ahead, but there was a really special moment on opening night to raise a banner because they did do the thing this summer. And we don't want to rush past that either. You were in the arena, morning skate, game, post game. What was it like being there?
Yeah, no, it was, you could feel it was really special in the building. You were there for morning skate as well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was such a full house. We weren't able to get everyone in the building that we wanted to for that night. And it was funny, like even at morning skate, you and I were laughing in the beautiful new locker room, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
That it's like this, it was like Stanley Cup final level media. It was a zoo. So we weren't able to have anyone there, but you could feel it even in morning skate. Like you saw the blank spot where the banner was going to go. And it just, you kind of had that special feel to it. And then for the game, there was so much anticipation from the crowd. I tweeted out a picture, I think right before the game. I mean, the seating bowl was probably at about 95% capacity when the team hit the ice for warm-ups. I have been to a lot of Avs games in my life. A lot. I've never seen it that full. Even for game one of the Cup final where there was, a real electricity. It wasn't the same. That was the banner raising night. We're hoping to see something special. We know we're about to see something really special. You hope it's not a once in a lifetime thing, right? But everyone just kind of knew that. Everyone was in their seat. And for me, the thing that kind of tied it all together, that made it such a special moment that I'm with you, even at the end of the year, even if they were to repeat, do it again this year, this will still, in my opinion, stand out as a top 3, top 5 special moment on this year. Jack Johnson, now a member of the Chicago Blackhawks, sitting on the bench, kind of taking it all in and, being a part of it. But when the team went to go take the picture in front of the banner with the Stanley Cup and watch it all linked arms be raised to the rafters, I believe it was Gabe Landeskog called for Jack Johnson to come off the ice, even though he's in the Chicago Blackhawks uniform, all that stuff, and be with the team for the photo, for the actual banner raising. And I just thought that was, one, such a great gesture on behalf of the guys. And two, it was just special because, especially recently, we've had to do a few shows about things that aren't great in pro sports and things. It's not just our shows, right? But this was one of those moments for me where it's like, this is what it's about, especially within hockey. And we've heard them talk about it a bunch. When you win together like that, you're connected for life. You're brothers for life is what they keep saying. And I thought that was a really cool moment of, it would have been really easy. No one would have batted an eye had Jack Johnson not been a part of that. It would have been like, oh, he's with his new team. But it was just a moment of, we did this together, and for 10 more minutes, we get to be part of this together. And then the puck drops, and he's on the other side, and you know all that stuff. But I thought it was just the perfect way to tie off last season, and it was a real nice. Having Jack Johnson there was a small little touch that I think made it 10 times more special as a way to perfectly kind of tie off that Cup season and shift the focus.
Yeah.
But no, I thought it was great. What was it? How was it on TV? Did they show the full?
It tugged at my heartstrings a little bit. I wasn't feeling any type of way about a banner raising watching from TV, but seeing the Jack Johnson cutaways, there were some waterworks, I think, for a lot of people. And it was just nice to see. I also wanted to ask if you saw, did Nathan MacKinnon get a little emotional?
Yeah.
It looked like he did. And I thought that was really, it's just wonderful to see players like a MacKinnon especially have that kind of reaction, because it is an important moment, especially for them to have together. So I think that was awesome.
I thought Mikko put it best after the game. That banner's there forever now. And he said, that's our banner. We come back here in 70 years. That's our banner.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great way of kind of, encapsulating all of that into, as few words as you can. But no, like you said, it was, I think it caught a lot of people off guard, myself included. You think that with everything they did in the summer, actually winning the cup and all that, kind of all the emotion side of it is past. But honestly, I thought that was one of the more emotional moments of the entire celebration of it all, was getting to watch that kind of immortalized. So I'm with you. Unexpected emotions. Especially
from McKinnon, who, being back in the locker room, one of the first things he said to you, wasn't it something along the lines of, Stanley Cup,
yeah,
I'm over it.
We're over it. Yeah, I'm over the cup thing, I think.
Are we actually, though? Because it seemed sentimental, and I think it's okay for both of those things to be true, because I guess the other part is this transition now, preseason camp into the regular season, you get to see the team up close too. Is there an increase in intensity that you're seeing in practices? For McKinnon, to me, it seems like he, from the jump, had the same level of intensity. But for everyone else, I do feel like it's ramping up.
Yep. I'm with you 100% on Nate. The phrase that I keep using, you and I've said it a bunch of times, the pressure's off, the intensity is up. I think having that weight of the disappointments,
right,
having that lifted, I mean, he looks like he's moving faster. Players know who's good. Cale Makar said last week that his bold prediction for the year was Nate scores 50. If you have a guy like Cale Makar saying he looks like he's actually found another gear, probably means you're doing something pretty good.
It's hard to unlock a new level when you are Nathan McKinnon.
But I'm with you. I think the team is starting to see that, hey, look, these guys have, the top guys on the team have dialed it up. We're going to follow suit. And even though it was a disappointing loss to Calgary, I'm with you. I think you're starting to see they understand how to win now, and they're dialing it up.
I think, too, in my opinion, there's a difference in practice between the top six chemistry and the D pairs chemistry, and then whatever's happening in the bottom six.
Yes.
And I notice it in the room, too, and some of that is genuinely new personnel, especially with an Ivan Rodriguez. So before we embark on the bottom six, second line, roster construction conversation, I liked the conversation about brotherhood in hockey. And I think the Tyson Jost, JT Compher segue is built in so naturally there. And we've got an upcoming game tonight against the Minnesota Wild with a top line center, Tyson Jost. It could be a revenge game for him. But it's also a moment for two really close friends to see each other again. Yeah.
We heard from Tyson Jost in a really emotional media day availability for him when Minnesota Wild camp opened, talking about, normally we hear guys say oh, I have a ton of friends, it was great to see him win. Tyson Jost was very open and honest. No, it was brutal to watch. It was really, I think he used the word painful. He said, I had some nights where I couldn't sleep. I had some nights where I cried myself to sleep. He had to delete social media. He couldn't watch a lot of the cup stuff. So I wanted to talk to JT Compher yesterday because they played in Tyson Jost was here in preseason, but that doesn't really count.
Yeah, because it wasn't a full Avs roster on that ice too. It was a mix of fringe guys on either side.
Yeah, but it was just I thought after that interview, I thought it kind of became a bigger story than maybe I thought it was going to be this year, because at the end of the day, we heard that Tyson Jost kind of wanted the trade. He seemed really happy there near the end of the season, got some elevated minutes. Like you said, he's going to be on their top line tonight, so he's going to get a chance that really he never got the chance to work into in Colorado. So I wanted to ask JT Compher a bit about it, and I think it's about 90 seconds, so we'll play it for you guys here in a second, and we'll kind of talk about it after. The one thing I will say, because I'm sure everyone's kind of expecting it, I tried to get him to talk to me a little about what he talked with Tyson Jost about this summer, and he didn't want to get too much into that. But I think if you've got that queued up, let's kind of hear what he had to say, because it was interesting. It was some cliches. It's JT Compher. He's never going to give you too much. But like you said, these guys are such great friends that after going everything that JT Compher just went through and now getting to play against them, I thought this would kind of be an interesting moment for them. So, if you've got that ready. Talk a little bit about Tyson Jost.
Yeah.
Obviously, with that game coming up on Monday, you guys were obviously really close when you guys first broke into the league. Can you just talk to me a little bit about how that was last year when the trade actually came through? I know that's something that had been discussed for a while.
I mean, it's Like we came in the league about the same time and lived together for a few years. He's one of my good friends, and it's just part of the job that things happen and teams change, and he's still one of my good friends, and we still talk a decent amount, and I still want him to succeed as a hockey player. Yeah.
Did you talk to him much after the Cup win? I know he did that interview this summer saying that it was kind of tough for him. Did you talk to him at all?
Yeah, I'd say we'll keep that between us, but we're still obviously friends, and doesn't affect. You have to be able to separate in this business, and a lot of guys in this room played with him for a while and liked him, and we wish him all the best.
How much are you looking forward to playing him?
I mean, as time goes on in the league, you realize you're going to play against good friends, guys you played against when you're younger, or played with in the NHL, and once it starts, it's just another game. It's just you go play hockey. It doesn't matter who you're playing against.
Give him an extra shot, maybe.
Maybe just try to win the face-off a little, have a little more motivation. Yeah.
JT, thanks so much.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
So yeah, not a ton. JT never likes to give us a bunch, but I think using the word brotherhood to describe these two was accurate, because in my opinion, it seemed like maybe he was even not struggling, but was being very choice with his words. He didn't want to say anything bad.
No, you could tell he was being very careful about what he chose to reveal, and I think it's a courtesy to Tyson and that friendship that he just kind of wants to keep some of that private. And I think a lot of people can respect that, because I think Jost was put in the hot seat with fans going onto his personal accounts and giving him a hard time about the trade. It just does seem like kind of a touchy subject in general. So I think it's just a reflection of the friendship too.
Yeah. Well, and the part that makes me laugh, and look, like obviously it's hard to play the what if game, and this is definitely not a slight on Nico Sturm. I mean, he essentially scores that goal that went off Andrew Cogliano, but he played a huge role in that game 4 victory for the Avs in the Cup final. So I'm not trying to take a swipe at Nico Sturm here, but given the role that Nico Sturm played, it's hard to imagine that that you wouldn't have gotten the exact same result with Tyson Jost there. So I'm with you. I thought it was funny. Not funny. I thought it was bad, weird. I don't know that people felt it necessary to go seek out Tyson Jost to talk shit. It's not like he was this huge piece moved out to make this big changeover and whatever. Unfortunately, part of the issue for Jost is he would have played a pretty insignificant role here anyways.
I think I don't know if you said it while we were muted or not, but the speculation that he requested a trade, I think it definitely happened. I'm a little unclear on the timeline too, and how long that persisted, and that feeling of wanting to be moved and seek more opportunity elsewhere. It's something not to understate too. And that is an opportunity that's available to him in Minnesota, and hopefully tonight he will seize the opportunity to. He'll definitely get plenty of runway to do it with a Minnesota team that's also not on a hot start. Goaltending remains a concern for them. It remains a concern for the Colorado Avalanche. There's a few storylines to keep an eye out for here.
Yeah, no, I said it on my morning skate update today. Minnesota is the biggest. They have the biggest range for me personally. I could see them being, right up where they were again last year, second in the division, within, an earshot of the Avs, 10 points, whatever. All the way to, I could see them missing the postseason altogether if the goaltending doesn't sort itself out. Marc-Andre Fleury, 11 goals against in 4 periods before being yanked, not getting the start tonight. And then, look, to your point, you hope for Tyson Jost, the person, that he does seize this opportunity and can really kind of change the narrative on his NHL career. But after how many years of watching Tyson Jost up close, I think everyone had kind of said, yeah, maybe he's just not really that guy. He's on their first line. He's their 1C. Minnesota lost a lot in the offseason. They're in cap hell with $13 million worth of dead cap. If Tyson Jost can't be a top 6 guy, they're going to be in some trouble. So yeah, like you said, this is our first glimpse at a division opponent for the Avs who has a chance to be up there. This will be a big game, as big of a game as you can get for game 3 of an 82-game season.
Everything's on the line tonight.
Right. But it's going to be interesting. I'm with you. I think there's a lot of
interesting storylines to follow tonight.
And internally, the storylines for the Colorado Avalanche, there's still a lot in the Avs forward group to be looking out for that I think we'll certainly see some mixing up in the bottom six. But one area that we want to see improvement or a step forward is on that second line.
Yep.
We talked about being in the room, new faces. Evan Rodriguez is a big part of that too. What are your overall thoughts on the second line so far?
Yeah, so I'll answer this in two ways. One, Evan Rodriguez, I think he's fit in really well culture-wise.
Right.
Look, he played with Sidney Crosby. He understands guys like Nathan MacKinnon, right? The really highly competitive, going to hold you accountable. He seems like he's kind of fit right in there. In terms of play on the ice, just for me personally, I liked a lot of what we saw out of him in camp.
Right.
I don't think that has translated to the games yet for Evan Rodriguez, in my opinion. Do you see that any different?
No, I felt the same way, and I asked him if he felt pressure or if he felt like he was inside his head a little bit because regular season has started. There's a lot of pressure on what they need this second line to be, and he said no, that it wasn't different pressure. Some of it is adjusting to systems, and I think there's something to be said for too. NHL regular season games, the matchups that he's going up against on the second line are significantly more difficult than what he saw in preseason. And even though his speed, that line in general, the pace has fit so well for the Avs, I think he's seeing steeper competition too. And I think both Newhook and Rodriguez have, not by their own admission, been in their heads a little bit. But I think for someone like Rodriguez, who does have maturity, it's probably less mental, but it probably is about adjustment.
Yeah, and I think pressure is a good word because, like, yeah, maybe he's not going to admit it, but at the end of the day, whether the Avs said this to him or not, he knows, who was on that second line last year and the type of production they got, and the fact that kind of like high end depth was part of what pushed the Avs so much. I'm with you. I don't think that it's necessarily a cause for concern as much as I do think it's a bit of an adjustment for both the guys that you named, both Rodriguez and Newhook, because who's the one guy that's really kind of thriving right now on that second line is Val Nichushkin, a guy who saw that role kind of elevate last year near the end and then was fantastic in the playoffs as a top line winger, getting the hardest matchups every single night en route to a Stanley Cup. He seems to kind of be picking right back up. So I'm with you. While I'll use the word disappointing through the first two games, that second line as a whole, I'm not concerned yet. I think it's going to take a few games for them to get comfortable. This is a big step for Alex Newhook. Like, let's not lose sight of that either. Right. I think, we kind of penciled him in as 2C early on in the preseason, and he earned that job. This is still a 21-year-old kid going from playing, 10 to 13 minutes a night against kind of whatever matchup to you're on the second line. You're now going to be closer to that 16, 17 minutes a night, playing in some nights really difficult matchups against other teams' top six. So I think it's going to take some time. Disappointed, but not concerned.
And looking at Nuke, he is in a position that they're similar to what Rodriguez is in right now, and what became of Nichushkin in the F system with time is something that we also will allow some allowances for Rodriguez to a little bit of time to acclimate and make that adjustment. And then just looking at them as a whole, Newhook, the maturity that we saw when he was on the show, it's still there. He's still one of the last off the ice, putting in the extra work. It doesn't seem to me like he is struggling with the responsibility, at least in terms of confidence. I think he's just working through it, but it's not in a way that concerns me either. So even just talking to Evan Rodriguez, upbeat, confident, I think he's held a role, especially looking at Pittsburgh, where he is used to having different things asked of him and just filling the role exactly what's been asked of him.
No, I think that's spot on, and I think he's working his way into that. And like in my head, I think you're ideal once you're fully healthy, or heavy. I think Evan Rodriguez is probably best suited for your third line, right? If you could do it, in a perfect world. If he can kind of work his way into this system, do those things that are being asked of him in a second line role, and then once you get heavy, oh my gosh, I did it again. Healthy. Once you get healthy, he slides down into that third role and can bring a little bit more skill, that maturity to the third line while understanding his role. Not concerning, but I'm with you. Let's give him a little bit of time to work in here. The Avs have a great track record now of finding these guys that they think fit and finding a fit for them where they usually excel. So yeah, I'm cool. I'm with you. I'm cool giving it some time.
And before I leave Evan Rodriguez conversation, this OC Makar business, there's a lot of college hockey people in that room.
Yep.
And I've heard there's a college hockey group chat.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I just didn't know if you had more insight into this and who all is involved, because there are a lot of people from different programs in that room. Evan Rodriguez being one of them. I just didn't know how many people were in on this, so I know who I need to talk to when I'm back in that room.
So it's funny, the one little part that we cut out of the JT interview, because he stopped himself before he got started talking. He's a University of Michigan guy, and now that you say that, I'm assuming he's in the chat because he was giving it to LOC a little bit before our interview kind of like officially got started, as O'Connor was coming into the locker room, like going to his stall to find the shirt there. And again, we had all been instructed by Kale to make sure to ask LOC plenty about UMass and DU. So it's funny you say that, because given the way that JT, he leaned over and he goes, hey, I think you got some questions to answer today.
A few people are in on this.
That was, I even had to like stop and think for a second. I was like, you're not DU. I was like, yeah, no, he's Michigan. I was like, why are you so giddy about this? But yeah, he was probably in on it. Part of the driving force behind the shenanigans.
That's too funny. And I'm on the case, but in talking about health or heaviness, depending on whichever word comes to mind first, health is a big concern right now. Not just, I don't want to get, there's a word I'm looking for, but end of the world. Nuclear options, right, when it comes to Helm and Landeskog. But we could debrief people on how that conversation started with Bednar and how you followed up on it too. Is there concern? And that's sort of where he did reiterate that there is a little bit a level of concern. With Helm, I think he's the easier one to talk about of the two. It still is concerning because based on the timeline that Bednar gave us for Helm's recovery, he is at the tail end of what was projected to be his return to the lineup. And I can't help but feel like it has a lot to do with why our bottom six is constructed the way that it is for now. And until I see Helm out of a no contact jersey, still pause for concern there. But Landeskog's definitely the biggest one. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so it was interesting because it was actually at the tail end of Bednar's availability. And someone at the very, very beginning had asked about, is there an update on Landeskog or Helm? And Bednar kind of breezed over it and said, nope, no update right now. Still kind of the same thing. And then right as we were getting near the end, I had a question about Jonas Johansson lined up. And Peter Baugh from The Athletic, great dude, asked Jared, is there a cause for concern at all with these injuries? And Bednar kind of tried to, slip this in there. He goes, honestly, yeah, at this point there is. And so I got halfway through my Jonas Johansson question, and I was like, I can't leave it on this. Like, I can't let him say there's a cause for concern and then end the availability with JoJo. So as soon as he got done asking about Johansson, I said, can you just elaborate a bit on what you mean with cause for concern? And then a couple folks kind of followed up beyond that. So we got some good answers that we don't normally get. And basically, here's where we're at. Gabe Landeskog started skating this summer as the season got nearer, and I don't think he necessarily used the word discomfort, but that's kind of what he implied. He said it didn't feel good.
Right.
Again, we're assuming it's the knee that he had surgery on last year. We have no reason to believe it's anything other than that right now. But he said, look, this wasn't really an injury that we anticipated as we started ramping back up for the season. He got on the ice and it wasn't feeling good. And so now, not only is he kind of paused all that, he still hasn't resumed skating. And that was the part a little bit where he said, this is where it's just caught our eyes a bit, is he hasn't gotten back on the ice yet. And this wasn't an injury we were anticipating. And now we're past the season started. He's not skating. And then like what you said with Darren Helm, and Bednar said,
Don't quote me on this.
And I laughed because I just looked at my camera, the 4 phones. Yeah. You behind me typing. It's like, well, that's literally what we're in the business of doing. But he said it was something like our original quote for Darren Helm's recovery was 8 to 12 weeks. And then this is where he said, don't quote me on this, but I think we're at week 13. So yes, he's at the very, very tail end of what they thought. And you're starting to bleed over into longer than what they thought. And we've seen now Darren Helm skate on his own in red, skate with the team in red, to now I haven't seen him on the ice in, I guess he skated before morning skate, before the banner raising ceremony. That was the last time I saw Darren Helm even on the ice. So it's just one of those things where what Jared Bednar was saying was anytime you don't have these guys in a game, it's a concern, but both of these have just extended beyond what we thought. And from what it sounded like a little bit, Gabe Landeskog's, they weren't really anticipating until he got back on the ice. And then it was, we'll get to the season and we'll be good. He's not even skating yet. If you don't count him.
The banner raising ceremony is like suspicious.
Yeah. It's like, so he's on skates. So he can be on skates. So he did. Jared Bednar said, yes, we are concerned. Now, I don't take that as we're concerned that these are like career-ending injuries.
Right.
But again, just maybe these are a little bit more serious than we thought. Maybe we may be without these guys for longer than we initially anticipated.
Right.
But that was kind of the big update. It went from, yep, they're just not ready yet, to, hey, not only are they not ready yet, but we thought they would be by now. So that's kind of where it's sitting with the two big injuries, the really only two injuries as of right now for the Avs. But we thought maybe we'd be seeing Lucas Sedlak and those guys work their way out of the lineup sooner. Sounds like it may be later.
And kind of in a similar vein, this will segue us into the bottom six conversation generally, but someone who is no longer in a no contact is Jacob McDonald, and it looks like he traveled with the team. I don't know in Sunday's practice if he was still practicing as a defenseman or if he was back skating as a forward, and if you have any expectation that we'll see Jacob McDonald get into a game here. So
they've had him as a defenseman, and they actually had Curtis McDermott both Saturday and Sunday as a forward.
Okay.
So my expectation right now is they're going to roll with Curtis McDermott. I don't think he's been bad the first two games.
Yeah.
I think he's better at forward than he is on D.
I feel more comfortable there.
Right. And look, he's a little bit easier for Jared Bednar to hide in a close game. You know, as it's getting down to the last few minutes, it's easier to hide a fourth liner than it is a defenseman, right? But they did send Anton Bleed down to the Eagles. He was officially reassigned. Part of the reason why I think they're keeping McDonald around is I think Bednar kind of likes having these two guys in McDermott and McDonald as almost kind of flex players.
Right.
I can plug either of them in defense or forward, and I'm comfortable in a pinch. I'm not anticipating we see Jacob McDonald barring an injury. I think they're just kind of keeping him around right now. I believe he will have to pass through waivers when it is time to send him down. I'm kind of done guessing on waivers. The guys that I thought for sure would pass through got claimed. The guys that I thought had a good chance to get claimed passed through, no problem.
Everything we knew.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna say I'd be worried about passing him through, but I'm gonna stop guessing.
I don't want to guess, but I assume he'll pass fine. I feel like a lot of rosters are a little more settled now than they were at a different point. And so hopefully nobody is looking to fill in some kind of hole with a utility forward / defenseman like Jacob McDonald. He's so bad at his job that nobody should pick him.
Right. Yeah. No. For all those GMs out there listening.
Yeah, if anybody's listening, don't pick him. No, but I mean, the Eagles, not to derail on an Eagles conversation, way too much, but they'll be relevant in a second too.
Yeah.
Their current forward group is made up with a lot of veteran players that are just going to have to sit because of the veteran rule. And it's a really weird dynamic in Loveland right now. It's great for the young players and prospects because they're almost guaranteed time on ice as a result of this. But someone like McDonald, if he is sent back down, there's weird decisions that are going to be made, and we're probably going to see free agency additions that they made to the Eagles lineup just sitting in Loveland. It's kind of a weird situation. They'll definitely want McDonald back, especially after this Texas series that we saw this last weekend. But it will be really interesting to see, especially with someone like Bleed there right now.
Yep.
The flexibility is something that Bednar has talked about. And the way he talked about it, he definitely teases that there's definitely a possibility that somebody gets called up, and it could just be Anton Bleed again, because it sounded like he knew he wasn't going to play Bleed because he didn't play game 1. Game 2, he liked McDermott there on the 4th line.
Yep.
And because the Eagles had games that weekend, he wanted him to get in games and just stay kind of fresh as a result. So I don't know what that means then. Is he stay in Loveland and continue getting fresh there? Or are you leaving that door a little open for someone like Bleed? Because he also said he was looking at some of the young players who got sent down, one of the last reassignment types of players in the games from this weekend as other possible options to get called up. And it feels hard not to talk about Martin Kaut because of at least the first game that he had, even in the second game wherein the Eagles did not play very well, he was competing. He was playing very hard and he was making noise in the offensive zone. So overall, a pretty good weekend for Martin Kaut, a pretty good statement weekend.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you use the phrase "made some noise," because we've kind of been jokingly talking about it with Jared Bednar's description of Anton Bleed. He's a loud player.
Yes.
And it's funny, Megan, because you and I don't remember if we were on a pod, if this is the same fly from the CHGO crossover pod. Like,
I'm losing my mind.
Yeah, it's been torturing us for 2 separate shows now. But one of the things that he said about Martin Kaut at camp was it's been Martin Kaut's entire pro career, just too inconsistent and not noticeable enough shift to shift. He made his presence felt in that first game against Texas, and like you said, to a less obvious extent in the second game as well. But that's what Martin Kaut needs to do. He needs to be a loud player. That's what Jerry Bednar's looking for. How can you make a difference on every shift? And to me, I think you are looking at Martin Kaut and Shane Bowers, as a guy that Jared Bednar said he thinks finally put himself into the mix to get a call up.
Yeah.
But right now it is Martin Kaut. He had the 2 games. What Martin Kaut needs to do, in my opinion, in order to earn a call up with this coaching staff, is he doesn't need to go out and score 2 goals every game. But he had a good visible game. What was it, Friday?
Yes.
And then in a loss the next day, wasn't as good, but found a way to be noticeable again.
Right.
That's what Martin Kaut needs to do. If you are going to be a full-time NHL player, then you need to be noticeable on 90% of your shifts in the AHL. Right? We talk about the way Alex Newhook was sent down last year.
Yeah.
Now, granted, a lot of production came with that, but he went down there and looked out of place. You need to look out of place in the AHL to get a call up to this team.
Right.
Defending Stanley Cup champions. We laugh about Jason Megna, with the way he spends so much time with the Avs the last couple of years, but he puts up points in the AHL in globs. Like, yeah, he's kind of the perfect quadruple A player, but that means that he stands out amongst AHLers. That's what Martin Kaut needs to do. In wins and losses, can you look like one of the best 2-3 players on the ice? If he can do that with consistency, he's going to get a call-up. He's going to get a look, especially with the uncertainty we were just talking about with Landeskog and Helm. Good weekend for him, good opening weekend for him. I want to see him build on that. He was skating with Shane Bowers. You made the comment to me that was a little unusual. Do you think that could be Greg Cronin trying to get these two to play off each other a little bit?
I think so, because so much of what plagued Bowers last season was visibility and inconsistency in line mates and being buried in the bottom 6. And so it feels like a direct response to those problems. Like, okay, we'll give you top line minutes. And these are 2 players in a very similar position. And that's why I found it unusual, is because I hadn't seen them get looks together before.
Yeah.
But they are in very similar positions, and how they play together. It's interesting. I am still reserving judgment on how I feel about it. It was obviously productive in the first game, and they have Jason Megna centering that line. So it kind of
should be a good AHL line, right?
Exactly why all of these 3 would be grouped together in that way. And I did like what I saw. Honestly, the strengths of Bauer's game really did shine in game 1, 2, and it might be a little bit quieter by comparison. But they are all pretty good skaters. Like, even Megna's so fast. He's a wonderful skater.
Yeah.
It's something interesting, and it's not only Bednar who's left that door open about the possibility of call-ups happening, but Cronin in his pregame for game 2 talked about the game from the night before.
Yeah.
And he said that, basically it's not a punishment to be sent to the AHL, that the opportunity is still there. It's difficult to make this team.
Right.
And he talked about Maltsev and Kaut kind of in a similar way. And it was about how they can disappear a little bit, that this is something he's trying to work out of them. It's pace and effort. And this is unfortunately words that have been used to describe both players before. So it's like, if this is continuing to be a problem, I like to see Kaut make noise, but you're right. He has to keep doing that.
Right.
And it has to show up consistently.
Yep.
And that's just the position that he's in. Like you said, you have to demonstrate that you are an elite AHL player to get that call up. And so 3-point night, great.
Yep.
No points the next night, a little harder. You're still demonstrating effort. Like in the AHL, there's a lot of parity, right? A lot of time spent on special teams. Games, the score of a game can just really, it could just be weird.
Can run away,
Brad Hunt, lone goal scorer in game 2. Like that just puts it into perspective.
Right.
These are weird games. But if you want to call up from the NHL team, you have to make noise every single game. And this is Maltsev's problem too. And I kind of wanted to recap what Bednar has said about different players in that decision group guys.
Yep.
And one of them was Maltsev, and he said he was quiet by comparison. So now, we're building some
Themes.
similar feedback that we're getting on players now from Cronin, from Bednar. It's creating kind of an interesting thing. And I think a lot of the fan base has been left wondering why Lucas Sedlak, and why was it at least by appearance Anton Bleed?
Right.
What do you think?
So the Sedlak one made, I thought, more sense to me because he's a former Jared Bednar guy, won the Calder Cup with Jared Bednar in the AHL, and then spent the last season or two, correct me there, in the KHL. Three. Spent the last 3 in the KHL, some decent production. I think they just kind of looked at that, and it's Greg Cronin's word that he told us after the one preseason game where he was the available coach after the game. He used a word, he said, not just consistency, but reliability. And I think Jared Bednar looked and said, I know this guy. I know what he brings. He was playing in the KHL the last few years. I know if I put him, if he gets stuck out there on an icing with 5 minutes left, I feel more comfortable that he's not going to cost us. And I think that's what Jared Bednar is looking for out of this kind of hodgepodge fourth line right now is, can these guys not actively hurt us? And to me, I think that has to be the question that you're asking about a guy like Martin Kaut is he going to come up here and is one of those lapses that we've seen from him, or a Maltsev, one of those effort lapses going to come at the wrong moment,
right,
where it's going to cost us. We saw the 2 penalties that Martin Kaut took in the preseason. They were lazy stick infractions where he wasn't moving his feet and he tried to reach into the hands and it cost them 2 minutes. Jared Bednar saying, I trust that Lucas Sedlak won't do that. I'm not saying he's a better player. I'm not saying he's a better goal scorer, but if you get caught out there, it's an icing, whatever it is, are you going to do that? And I feel more confident that Lucas Sedlak and, like you said, for a minute there, Anton Bleed, I feel like they aren't going to cost us in that way. Again, I'm not saying that.
Right. Endorsing it.
Right. But I will say this. I get it, right? And it's anecdotal evidence, I know, but like, you don't have to look any further than what I just listed there. Martin Kaut's effort got him in trouble on those 2 penalties.
Right.
And I think Jared Bednar is saying, if you're dog tired at the end of the game, I don't trust that you're not going to go out there and do something like that. And until Martin Kaut proves, I don't have to be scoring every single night, but my effort has to be there, my feet have to be moving. Once he proves that, I think he'll get a shot and he can stick. But if he can't show that, hey, I can do this night in, night out, regardless of if I'm putting up points or not, in my opinion, he's going to have a really hard time getting to the NHL and sticking on this roster.
And there's a few things working in his favor specifically, though not for the greater good of the team, and those are those injuries and the uncertainty around some of the timeline for return for these guys. There's opportunity then left on the table because I'm getting the impression that he's not satisfied with the bottom 6 as it's currently constructed and performing. He might remain, leave those lineups intact, but he needs something different from both the 3rd and the 4th line.
Yep.
And based on how he's described it too, because he's talked about Cogliano and OC being types that I think he plans on having on a 4th line later in the season. Right now they're on the 3rd. And it seems like there are going to be changes coming. is it Ben Meyers, live or die by Ben Meyers for long, or is that in question?
I think it's fair to question it because he's waiver exempt. You can send him, send him down, call him up kind of freely. If you feel like maybe he needs a little bit more of that adjustment period. What I think Jared Bednar likes about Ben Meyers, and to a lesser extent, I know we're getting close on time, so I won't go too far down this tangent. But a guy like Curtis McDermott, you're getting a better chance to see it this year, but it's something that a lot of the guys, media guys and gals who were around the team every day last year, it's something that we talked about, and you and I were just talking about it the other day. You can say whatever you want about Curtis McDermott. You can never say that dude doesn't work his ass off every single day. He's always one of the first ones on the ice. He's always one of the last ones off. He works with the skills coaches. He goes out there and helps warm up the goalies. He does everything he can to help the team. And then in a game, even if he's not ultra effective, he works. He puts in the work. And for a guy like Meyers, I see some of that, similarity in terms of the way that he skates. He's heavy on the wall. He goes to the net. And I just think that's stuff that Jared Bednar values. They gave Curtis McDermott a 2-year extension because of that type of stuff.
Right.
So I don't necessarily know if it's live and die by Ben Meyers. I think if they think he's struggling, I wouldn't be surprised if they sent him down. But I think Jared Bednar likes the work ethic and says, I think he'll work into what we need him to be if he keeps doing that. And I think that just all kind of ties in as to some of the decisions that we see made come back to what is the effort level. I think that was a good word that you used a minute ago, is what's the effort level every shift, every practice, every game, every whatever. And not to beat up too much on Martin Kaut, but we saw on that first day of training camp that the conditioning test seemed like it kicked his ass more than anyone else's. They're all tired and all that stuff, but he really seemed to struggle through that. And I just think that it's when you're talking about margins this thin between this player, player A and player B, I think that's kind of where the Avs are weighing it right now. And in my opinion, I think Ben Meyers does a lot of that stuff. And so I am not pinning him as a guy to get sent down. But now that I said that, he'll be reassigned tomorrow and I'll look silly.
But the waiver exempt status thing, if that happened, I would point to that because I think you're right. I think his effort level is there, and I think he was crafted in a lab somewhere to be a Bednar prototype player that he loves to coach. And so I'm not actually worried about Meyers sticking in this lineup. There is just some adjustment that's happening slower than everyone expected, but the effort level is still there for me. And I feel like the Curtis McDermott note is a great way to wind down the show because we talk about being back at the rink, the different types of things. They have a not so great game against Calgary, right? And then they go to practice on Saturday. They work really hard and they close it out with this fun shooting game. And when Curtis McDermott scores, that whole team is rallying around him happier than I've seen them for a lot of other things.
Right.
They love him so much in the room that it's not to be understated. And I think I'm just looking forward to seeing more moments like that throughout the course of the season.
For sure. I was happy that he got in the lineup for the banner raising night because I know how the team feels about him. And then I was happy that he drew 2 penalties. He played well enough that they were like, hell yeah, run it back again. And he sat in the press box for every single game of that Stanley Cup run. Never once complained. Like I said, first one on the ice at practice, every single day, last one off, working with the skills coach and stuff. And wow, what a great way to tell us it. Brotherhood, it just all ties it back together.
Like an episode of Seventh Heaven. That's
right.
This keeps happening. Yes. And the theme is Curtis McDermott.
That's right.
Well, I have never done a closeout on a show, so I'm going to send it away. We'll be back next week, hopefully doing a really similar segment with even more things going around the league. And we'll be keeping an eye on those storylines for the game tonight, and we'll be here with a pregame and postgame later. So postgame.
I wasn't going to say anything, but postgame.
Oh, man.
Thanks, guys.